Living alone often confronts us with a deep fear. The fear of emptiness, the absence of voices, the lack of distractions. However, this apparent challenge can turn out to be one of the most transformative experiences we can live through. What happens when the noise of routine stops and we are left alone with our own thoughts? Is silence something to be feared, or can it be a portal to inner dimensions we have never explored? When Buddha withdrew from the world, he was not seeking to escape, but rather to dive into the depths of his own essence. He showed us that it is in silence that we begin to hear the answers we have been searching for. What if, instead of fleeing from this quietude, we learn to listen to it? Perhaps what we call solitude is, in fact, the beginning of a more intimate conversation with ourselves, a chance to understand who we are and how we truly connect to the world. Could it be that by accepting silence, we discover the path to our own growth and enlightenment? If you've ever wondered what solitude can really reveal about who you are, stay with us. In this video, we will explore how Buddha transformed silence into a tool of wisdom and how you can apply these same principles in your life. Together, let's discover what silence has to teach us, and you may be surprised by the power that exists within every moment of solitude. Keep watching, because the next step in this journey could completely change your perception of living alone. When Prince Siddhartha Gautama, later known as Buddha, left the luxury of the palace, he was not just fleeing from wealth or opulence. He sought something that could not be found in the material world, an understanding of himself and the nature of human suffering. By stepping away from the distractions of the world, he embarked on a journey of self-discovery, confronting his own limitations and discovering the essence of existence. Living alone offers us a similar opportunity, not necessarily for the same spiritual goal, but to understand who we are when the external noise fades away. However, self-discovery is not something that happens immediately or easily. Many of us are afraid to face our own minds without distractions. How often do we avoid silence, immersing ourselves in activities, social media, or even superficial interactions just to avoid being alone with our thoughts? Living alone forces us to confront this barrier. Solitude becomes a rare opportunity to look within and discover aspects of ourselves that often go unnoticed. Each day we spend in our own company is an invitation to reflect on our attitudes, beliefs, and desires. Deep questions begin to arise. Who am I when no one is watching? What dreams have I hidden under the expectations of others? How can I live more authentically? Just as Buddha found clarity through his introspection, we can find valuable answers when we allow silence to reveal our deepest truths. Self-discovery is the first step toward a life of greater meaning and inner peace. Silence ceases to be oppressive and becomes an ally in this journey of personal understanding. One of the greatest fears many people face when living alone is the fear of loneliness. The feeling of being disconnected from others can seem overwhelming, especially in a society that places so much value on constant interaction. However, if we change our perspective, we can see that solitude is not something to be feared, but rather a valuable opportunity for growth. In Buddhism, solitude is deeply valued as a necessary state for meditation and introspection. Buddha spent long periods in complete isolation during his spiritual quest. He knew that in order to truly understand suffering and the nature of the mind, it was essential to silence the external voices and listen to what silence had to teach. But what can we learn in the silence of solitude? One of the first things we discover is that, contrary to what we think, we are not really alone. Within us lies an infinite number of thoughts, emotions, and desires waiting to be explored. And could it be that, in truth, we spend most of our lives trying to escape this inner company? Solitude teaches us to be comfortable with who we are, without the need for external validation. It shows us that we can be emotionally self-sufficient, that we can find happiness within ourselves. This doesn't mean we don't need others, but that our relationships with people become healthier when we don't depend on them for our self-esteem or well-being. When Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree and attained enlightenment, he was completely alone. Yet at the same time, he was in deep connection with universal truth. He demonstrated that the deepest and most transformative growth can occur when we learn to rely on ourselves. Solitude ceases to be an absence and becomes fertile ground for personal evolution. Today, in a world where we are constantly surrounded by information and distractions, silence can seem oppressive. However, Buddha always emphasized the importance of silence for spiritual development. Silence is not just the absence of sound, but the presence of a space where the mind can calm down and answers can naturally arise. But are we ready to embrace this quietude? At first, silence can make us feel uncomfortable. It can force us to deal with thoughts and feelings we would rather avoid. However, when we allow ourselves to immerse in this space, we discover that silence is a source of power. In it, we find clarity, peace, and a deep connection with ourselves. Buddha taught that the mind, like the surface of a lake, can only reflect clearly when it is calm. In the turmoil of daily life, our mind is like disturbed water, unable to reflect what is truly happening inside us. In silence, however, this agitation subsides and we can see with clarity. There is an ancient Buddhist story about a monk who, in search of enlightenment, was instructed by his master to simply sit in silence and do nothing. At first, the monk felt frustrated, unable to control his thoughts. But over time, he began to realize that silence was not a state of inaction, but rather a space where true transformation could occur. It was in the silence that he found the peace he sought. When we live alone, we have the opportunity to create moments of silence in our lives. Instead of fearing the emptiness, we can learn to appreciate it as a chance to reconnect with our essence. When we are forced to rely solely on ourselves, something curious happens. We discover that we are more capable than we imagine. Living alone, whether by choice or circumstance, places us in front of responsibilities that we often underestimate. But what if these responsibilities were actually opportunities for us to grow and become more independent? In Buddha's path, simplicity and self-sufficiency were essential. By leaving the comfort of his life as a prince, he had to learn to take care of himself at a basic level, from obtaining his own sustenance to meditating for hours without the external support he was used to having. This process wasn't just a lifestyle change, but a spiritual practice. He learned that taking care of the body and mind was a form of purification, a path to clarity and enlightenment. Our daily life, no matter how simple it may seem, can also be transformed into a spiritual practice. When we take care of ourselves, whether by cooking a healthy meal, keeping our space organized, or managing our finances, we are practicing the art of mindfulness. Each small act of self-care becomes a way to connect with the present and with our own capacity for self-sufficiency. Additionally, self-sufficiency teaches us to trust our own abilities and decisions more. We often rely too much on others for validation or support, which can make us feel insecure when we are alone. However, by living alone, we learn to trust our own judgment and take responsibility for our actions. Buddha taught that true freedom comes from within, from the ability to live simply and not depend excessively on the external world. By developing this self-sufficiency, we are, in a way, moving closer to this inner freedom. One of the biggest challenges of living alone is establishing structure in our day. When there is no one to remind us of our responsibilities or even to accompany us in daily activities, it's easy to fall into the trap of neglect or procrastination. However, at the same time, this freedom offers us the opportunity to create a routine that reflects our values and priorities. Routine, often seen as something tedious, is actually a way to create stability and balance in our lives. In Buddhism, discipline is one of the fundamental practices for spiritual growth. Buddha and his followers lived simply, following a daily routine that included meditation, study, and community service. This balance between work, rest, and spiritual practice is essential for a harmonious life. But do our routines help us grow, or do they imprison us? The key is finding a middle ground. A routine that is too rigid can make us feel suffocated, while a lack of structure can leave us feeling lost. When we live alone, we have the opportunity to create a flexible routine, but one that keeps us focused on what is important. Perhaps this includes daily moments of meditation or reflection, time to exercise both body and mind, and even leisure moments to help us relax. Moreover, a well-planned routine can help us better cope with the emotional ups and downs that often arise when we are alone. Knowing that we have a plan for the day gives us a sense of control and purpose, even during the most challenging phases. When we live alone, we are forced to deal with our emotions more directly. Without the constant distraction of other people, we are confronted with our own feelings, anxieties, and fears. However, is this something to be avoided, or can it be seen as an opportunity for emotional growth? Buddha taught that suffering is an integral part of life, but that the key to overcoming this suffering lies in how we deal with it. By meditating and observing our emotions without attaching to them or trying to avoid them, we begin to develop a greater understanding and acceptance of our feelings. This process, called insight in Buddhism, is fundamental for emotional growth. Living alone gives us the opportunity to practice this observation of our emotions on a deeper level. Instead of distracting ourselves or turning away from our feelings, we can learn to face them head-on. This helps us develop emotional resilience that will be useful in all areas of life. Furthermore, living alone teaches us to be more compassionate with ourselves. Many times we are our own harshest critics, judging ourselves harshly for our mistakes or failures. However, when we spend more time with ourselves, we begin to realize that we are human and that making mistakes is part of the learning process. This acceptance of our flaws is a powerful way to grow emotionally. Meditation is, in essence, a practice of being with oneself. When we sit in silence, observing our breath and thoughts, we are allowing ourselves a moment of true introspection. But are we making the most of this time? Meditation, as taught by Buddha, is a powerful tool for personal growth. By living alone, we have the opportunity to transform our home into a sacred space for meditation. We can dedicate a quiet place to practice daily, creating an environment that helps us connect with our inner self. The regular practice of meditation allows us to observe our thoughts and emotions without judgment, helping us develop a greater understanding of ourselves. Buddha attained enlightenment through meditation, and his teachings show us that the path to inner peace begins with careful observation of the mind. By meditating, we are cultivating patience, acceptance, and wisdom, qualities that help us cope with the challenges of life, whether we are alone or in society. We all, at some point, feel loneliness as an uncomfortable presence. But what if loneliness was seen in a different light? What if, instead of distancing ourselves from it, we embraced it as part of our growth? Buddha taught that acceptance is the key to overcoming suffering. When we try to resist our emotions, we end up amplifying our discomfort. Similarly, when we fight against loneliness, it becomes heavier. However, by accepting it as a natural part of life, we begin to find peace. Living alone teaches us that being alone doesn't have to mean emotional isolation. In fact, by facing loneliness with courage, we find a deeper connection with ourselves and, paradoxically, the practice of metta. The practice of loving kindness, known as metta, is one of the most powerful in Buddhism. It teaches us to cultivate feelings of compassion and kindness, first for ourselves and then for others. This practice is especially useful when we are alone, as it reminds us that even when we are physically alone, we are never truly separated from other beings. When living alone, the practice of metta helps us develop deep self-compassion. Often we are our own harshest critics, but loving kindness invites us to treat ourselves with the same kindness we would offer to a dear friend. Although living alone may offer us many opportunities for growth, it's important to remember that human connection remains essential. In Buddhism, the Sangha, the community of practitioners, is a fundamental part of the spiritual path. Buddha knew that while self-knowledge is crucial, we also need the support and encouragement of others on our journey. When we live alone, we can strengthen our connections with others in more meaningful ways. Instead of seeking superficial relationships to fill a void, we can cultivate friendships that truly matter. This allows us to build a support network based on mutual trust and respect. Solitude can also be a powerful catalyst for creativity. When we are alone, our minds have the necessary space to wander and explore new ideas. Many artists, writers, and musicians report that their most creative moments emerge during periods of isolation. Buddha, on his journey to enlightenment, often withdrew to meditate in solitude. During these moments, he found clarity and wisdom, which he later shared with the world. Similarly, by living alone, we can use our solitude as a space to create, whether by writing, painting, or exploring any other form of creative expression. As with everything in life, balance is essential. Living alone offers many opportunities for self-knowledge, but it's also important to find time to be with others. Buddha taught the middle way, avoiding extremes. Similarly, we need to find a balance between solitude and social interaction. This balance allows us to enjoy the best of both worlds. Solitude gives us time to reflect and grow, while connecting with others reminds us that we are part of a larger network of life. The ability to live alone requires a certain amount of resilience. We all face challenges along the way, but how we deal with those challenges truly defines our growth. Buddha faced many obstacles on his path to enlightenment, but he never gave up. Similarly, we can learn to view the challenges of solitary life as opportunities to become stronger and more resilient. Each difficulty we face teaches us something new about ourselves and prepares us for future challenges. Learning to adapt to changes and find balance amid difficulties is a valuable skill that helps us face any situation with serenity and confidence. Buddha taught that true happiness does not depend on external circumstances, but rather on our own attitude toward life. By living alone, we have the opportunity to explore this truth deeply. We can learn to find joy in small things, the silence of a peaceful morning, the preparation of a simple meal, or a moment of reflection. Living alone teaches us that happiness doesn't have to be grand or dramatic. It can be found in the simplest and most everyday moments. When we learn to appreciate these small joys, we realize that happiness is always within our reach, regardless of the circumstances. Solitary life offers a quiet space for spiritual exploration. Buddha, by withdrawing to meditate and reflect, found enlightenment. While not all of us are seeking enlightenment in a religious sense, we can still use our time alone to explore deep spiritual questions about life and the universe. Meditation, prayer, or simply time for silent reflection allows us to connect with something greater than ourselves. By connecting with the divine or with nature, we find a source of peace and meaning that sustains us even in the most difficult phases. Living alone is a continuous journey of self-discovery, growth, and transformation. Just as Buddha walked his path in search of enlightenment, each of us is on our own journey, discovering what it means to live fully and authentically. Every challenge we face, every moment of silence we embrace, brings us closer to a deeper understanding of who we are and what truly matters in life. If this journey of self-knowledge and personal growth resonated with you, don't forget to like the video to help us continue bringing more transformative content like this. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss our next videos. Together, we can keep exploring these deep reflections and applying Buddha's wisdom to our daily lives. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.